A bug just landed on my camera. That's super annoying and I want to smash it. But I'm not going to because the camera might fall over. Okay, back to our top. He's just going to crawl around on the camera. Go. Go. Christy with the Chirp YouTube channel. I just read a recent study on exercise and children with ADHD, and that inspired me to do a little research into nature. And it was outdoor exercise, I should say. And that inspired me to do a little bit of research into nature and autism spectrum disorders, because sometimes some of the things that work for attention deficit difficulties also tend to work in beneficial ways for kids with autism. And I found some really interesting studies that I want to share with you today. We know for sure that nature is good for us. We were not created to live in little boxes with the windows and the doors shut and artificial air circulation going on for our entire lives. We were created to be outside most of the time. Many of us live in places where that is not really a possibility because of the weather. Sometimes we can't be outside as much as potentially our ancestors were who lived in different climates. I currently live in the Arizona desert where it gets very, very hot, and you cannot be outside safely for very long when it is 115 or 118 degrees. That is the same for those of you who live in very cold places. You cannot be outside very safely unless you are well bundled up, I suppose, with even your eyeballs covered, if it is 70 degrees below zero. I'm talking in American units, Fahrenheit, because that's what I know. Translate if you must to figure out what I'm talking about. But I think you can gather from context that on either extreme, it's difficult to be out in nature. However, most of us are not on that extreme for very long, unless you live in Antarctica. And there is a good portion of time when we can be outside. And even in the extremes, you can be outside. Here where I live, you can go outside very early in the morning and it's not too hot yet. If you live in one of those colder places, you can bundle up really well and go out even if it's just for a few minutes and do something outside. There's something about being outside that is good for us. Some of that we have researched and we know a little bit about. Most of it is still a mystery, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't still be doing it, even if it's a mystery. The first thing I'm going to mention is that being outdoors is really good for the sensory system. And the sensory system is something that is often dysregulated in kids who have autism spectrum disorders. Let's talk about some of the inputs that we can get to our sensory system in the various sensory modalities when we go outside. Let's talk about our vision. There is a lot to look at outside, and it's far away. We can look at far away things. This is not so much the case if you live in a forest, unless you look up and you can see through the trees. But your eyes want to look at things that are far away. It's not healthy for us to look at things that are right in front of our face. It's not healthy for us to look at things that are directly right in front of us. So not only are we meant to look at things that are far away, we're meant to look at things that are off to the side. It's very important for kids, especially those who might have some reading delays, to actually be looking on the periphery, to be able to gather information from the sides, not just from directly in front of them. It's important to learning that we be able to absorb information that happens off to the side. A lot of our kids with any sort of learning delays are seated directly in front of what we want them to absorb information from. The teacher or the parent who's working or the therapist. It's a really good idea to present information from the sides, from a diagonal, sometimes from the back, so that the child has to turn to be able to access the full amount of information. Our bodies need to be able to do that in order to function well. Being outside is one of the ways that kids can practice this without making it an exercise that we need to practice because it's our homework. Instead, we just naturally look towards a noise or look at a tree or a specific plant off to the side of our trail that has a beautiful flower. We turn and we look. This is really good for kids who might have some difficulty with their visual senses. Also, we get lots of good input through our vision. Looking far away, I forgot to mention, does something to help calm us down. We actually feel more hopeful when we're looking far away. We feel calmer when we can let our eyes relax and just take in the cloudy sky or the ocean for miles and miles and miles. Just ocean, or just trees, or the lake, or whatever the scenery is where you live. For me, it might be the desert. It might just be miles and miles of beautiful desert. And my eyes can relax and enjoy taking all that in. It does good things for your brain as well as for your eyes. One of the reasons why people become myopic and need to wear glasses is because we look at things. I'm a crazy reader. I read all the time. And I have since I was very young. And I didn't end up needing glasses until I was in high school, and then only part-time. But scientists think that we need glasses more and more because we're so used to having things up close that that's what our eyes get used to. And so you may prevent some eye bills down the road if you make sure to present your kids with lots of outside time where they can look at stuff that's far away. Let's talk about the vestibular system. Vestibular is, you have vestibular canals inside your ear, and these tell you where your body is, what position your body is in the world based on the tilt of your head. There are some kids who really need a lot of input to that area in order to feel calm and regulated. Being outside is a great way to get some of that because we can go on the monkey bars and go upside down. Being upside down, changing positions from here to here, so a slide or a teeter-totter slash, what's the other word for that? I can't remember. But that thing where if one goes up, the other side goes down, a seesaw, that's what it is. A teeter-totter or a seesaw are great for that because the body is changing elevation. That's really good for the vestibular canals. Climbing a tree, doing something where you're going over waves, all these things are great for the vestibular system. Of course, we can talk about the auditory system too, which is actually the sense of hearing things. And outside is wonderful for being able to hear sounds that you don't normally hear when you're inside, such as birds or dogs barking. You might hear that inside. Potentially airplanes going overhead, wind whooshing the leaves, water lapping at the shore, or the ocean waves, or the forest crackling and branches falling, and your footsteps as you walk through fallen leaves or on the dirt. In the desert, it kind of goes crunch, crunch, crunch because it's a lot of rocks and gravel. All these sounds are really good inputs to our auditory system, and they can be very calming. Proprioception is the ability to feel where your body is in space. Kids who have difficulty with proprioception will often crash into things. They will want you to push your hands on their head. They will maybe run into you or run into the wall. They may want to be wrapped up in a little burrito and squished. They need to feel their muscles and their joints. They need to feel their tendons pushing against things in order to feel secure. You'll notice babies need a lot of this as well. This is why we swaddle babies. It's good for the development of their proprioception. And some of our kids, especially those on the autism spectrum, need more of that as well. Being outside is good for this because we can stamp our feet in the grass. We can roll down a hill. We can hang from the monkey bars. We can put our forehead against a tree and press hard, or against the dirt. We can do a handstand with our feet against a rock or something and be upside down, but also have our hands pressing nice and firmly into the ground, which is very, very soothing. We have to talk about our olfactory sense as well, of course, which is how things smell. We are getting that input of how things smell. This is one that really refreshes me and makes me feel grateful and peaceful and content when I smell freshly mown grass, when I smell creosote in the desert after a rainstorm, when I smell the air, when it smells good and fresh, when I smell leaves, even the decaying ones in the fall. That's a really, really good smell. Running water has a smell, lakes have a smell, of course the ocean has a smell. All of these things benefit us in our olfactory sense. As you can see, our senses benefit a lot from being outside. As grown-ups, we sometimes forget this because the couch is more comfortable than sitting on the grass. And so we stay inside and we become sort of like bubble creatures who we can modify our internal environment, our indoor environment. We can't really modify the outdoor environment quite as much. So there are bugs, there are sticks that we might sit on. The birds are too loud. The smells are too overwhelming. There might be a spider. We make all these excuses about why we don't really go outside. But going outside is really good for us too. I also should mention at this point that there is some good science on grounding, which is when your skin touches the ground or a living tree, there's something that happens to our electrical currents or something that actually has an effect on what happens inside our body. I'll put some links to that below. It's still a developing science, but I'm convinced so far by the evidence. Not enough that I go out every day barefoot, but I think I would if it weren't so hot here. Sometimes we can't step on the ground because the ground is too hot, but I could still touch a tree every day and that would probably be okay. So maybe I need to commit to trying that. Another thing about being outside, not only is our sensory system benefited, but usually when we're outside, we're doing something active. Sometimes we might just be lying by a lake and watching the ducks, and that is wonderful also. But usually when we're outside, we're doing something active, which is movement and which is exercise. We don't necessarily need to call it exercise because that just offends some of us because we've had such bad experiences with feeling pressured to do some form of exercise. I'm here to encourage you, but not to pressure you. One of the things about exercise is that it is proven to help kids have better on-task behavior, have better motor behavior, so how they use their muscles, and do better academic responding. So if a teacher asks for someone to raise their hand, the kid would raise their hand, or they might answer a question, that kind of thing. This was just one study that reported that. But imagine how if our kids were getting enough movement, how much better their brains would work. When you move, blood flow goes to your brain and it works better. You probably have noticed this if you ever have moved around, that you felt like your brain was kind of fleshed out and more creative and more peaceful also. It's really a magic medicine that we don't take advantage of because, once again, it's easier to stay on the couch and more comfortable. But it's not as good for us. Exercise helps people with autism better control their minds and their bodies. Of course, if we're moving around, we are getting used to the unique control that we need to have over certain parts of us to do certain activities. So if I'm going to grab a rock off the ground, I need to practice using my hand. I need to practice grabbing something and picking it up. I need to coordinate my eye glance with the rock. Someone's not just putting it right in front of my face and saying, look, a rock. I see it, I go for it, I pick it up, I look at it, I examine it, I'm thinking about it, I might show it to someone else. There's a lot of motor action that happens when we are outside, and we can consider that exercise. Exercise is a fun and safe way to increase social interactions and to increase communication. Because if I find a really cool rock, I'm not just going to want to hold it or just leave it there. I'm going to want to show it to you because this is a really cool rock and I like it and I want to take it home. Is that okay? Yes, it is. Take the rock home and keep talking about the rock. And your kid might be stimulated by something that she sees outside to want to investigate, to want to learn more about that. Why is this rock two different colors and this rock is a lot of different colors? Why does this rock have a seashell embedded in it? Where did that come from? Where do rocks come from? These are all really good things to learn about because there's a lot of science, there's a lot of vocabulary, there are books for kids on almost every topic. So if your child starts a fascination with trees or with different kinds of leaves, go to the library, get a bunch of books out about leaves and trees, keep going on nature walks, keep investigating trees. If your kid has a thing for birds or even a thing for trains, be outside, watch the trains go by, look at the train tracks, learn everything you can about trains, use it as an opportunity for learning. Exercise also helps calm our sensory system in many of the ways that we talked about in the previous section of this video, how our sensory system is calmed just by nature itself. It's also calmed by exercise. It just calms us down. It soothes us. Exercise helps kids who have apraxia, which is a difficulty sequencing muscle movements. As you can imagine, I have to sequence my hand to touch a tree. Then I touch it and I realize that I moved my hand just the way I wanted to. Or I moved it too far and I hit my hand. Or I didn't move it far enough and I didn't touch the tree bark the way I wanted to. We get automatic feedback when we're doing things like this ourselves, when it's not a practice given to us by our occupational therapist who gives us verbal feedback. Instead, we're getting natural feedback in a natural environment and in an environment that is non-threatening. Nature has this way of, a bear could come across your path. That is a way that nature could be threatening. But in most cases, trees will not harm you. A pond probably will not harm you, assuming you don't fall in or an alligator doesn't come out of it. The grass is unlikely to harm you. Of course, you can think of ways that all these things could damage you or your child. But for the most part, nature is a welcoming friend, and it feels safe to learn from nature and in nature. There are outside schools that focus on a lot of outside time, and I'm going to put some links to that down below. I think that's just a fabulous idea, and the science is showing that it really does help kids' brains. And I like that. I like the idea of kids' brains being supported. Since we have talked about sensory stuff, I also have to mention that being outside decreases sensory irritations. If you think about the things that bug you, the sounds that bug you, maybe the light, maybe the fan clicks, maybe it's other people clearing their throat or making weird noises with their lips or whatever. Maybe it's reflections that are distracting. My fan is spinning right over here, my ceiling fan, and it's kind of out of the corner of my eye. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of distracting a little bit sometimes. All of these things decrease when we go outside because somehow the repetitive things that happen in nature soothe us instead of irritating us because they're natural. There's something about that that's beneficial to us. So I'm likely to be less irritable when I'm outside. Those are some reasons why you should get outside and why you should get your kids outside as much as possible. If you're a teacher, please take advantage of any play space that you have that is outside. I have linked an article down below about a preschool that does the most time outside possible and the different kinds of equipment that they use out there. Most of it's natural, sticks and pine cones and leaves and baskets full of rocks, and it's very creative, and there's no reason why any of this has to be high tech. It shouldn't be high tech, of course. It's nature. We don't want technology out there. We want sticks and rocks and pine cones and leaves and sand. We want the kids to get dirty. It's really good for the sensory system to practice doing things that feel slightly threatening. Mud is scary. But when I see my friends playing in the mud, when I poke it with a stick, and the stick is kind of dirty, but it's kind of a neat texture, these kind of things help kids relate better to other textures and be less afraid when they encounter new textures, new smells, all of those things. We need experience to feel comfortable and confident with new adventures. And being outside, being in nature, experiencing it with a safe person there to protect you, and in a way that is non-threatening and fun and playful, has all sorts of wonderful developmental benefits. I hope you take advantage of them. Also, I hope you take a moment this week to be outside, to let your gaze soften, to look at something in the distance, whether it's the sky, whether it's a tree, whether you stand in the middle of the road of your tiny town and you look down the street for miles and miles, there's no one coming, and you just let yourself gaze. It's really good for your brain, and it will help you to feel relaxed, and you'll be better at whatever it is that you are doing in life. Thank you for watching this video. I'll see you next week. Take care. Thanks for watching. Bye. Back to the topic at hand. Oh my goodness, he's back. I have to smash him. I think I missed. Maybe he'll come back and I can try again. This is me, a non-violent person. Bugs make me feel violent because they're so icky.